Alright, for today's video review, we're going to be taking a look at Transformers Unite Warriors Mixmaster. And yeah, this guy is definitely one of the more perplexing choices in the Combiner Wars / Unite Warriors Constructicon set, just because for whatever reason, they just decided to completely change the type of cement mixer that he transforms into from his G1 counterpart. Whereas, they kind of made him a more modern cement mixer where it's kind of like doesn't really look like anything. It's just kind of like a weird blob of a truck. And it's facing this direction, whereas, the original Mixmaster toy kind of looked more like a traditional truck with the, the cement drum on the back, which you can kind of do by turning this guy around, but then the front end is still very strange. And I have no idea why they made this choice, and I'm sure that they will not make this choice with the Studio Series version when that one gets revealed. So he's probably another one that's going to be a little bit switched around, but it certainly wasn't for any sort of like design necessity, because honestly, you could make this guy transform almost exactly the same and just like reshape the sculpting of it. And have it work perfectly well as a more traditional cement mixer. So yeah, I don't know. This has always been a very strange thing to me. It reads to me like someone on the design team was just like a real nerd about like construction vehicles at the time and wanted to just make like a more, I guess, realistic, what you'd typically see of a cement mixer nowadays kind of design. But I don't know a single person that was a fan of this change. So yeah, I don't know. I personally choose to have him be this way, even though it looks a little bit silly. It just looks a little bit better to me. And one of the things that they did with the Unite Warriors design is they really did lean more heavily into this being like a potential front of the cab. Like they gave him like the windows here that are picked out, even though that doesn't match any sculpted detail. And then they, picked these out how they would have been on the original toy. So yeah, there were some third-party things that like added an extra cab here, like back in the day, but I don't have any of that. But yeah, personally, I prefer to look at him this way, though technically, as intended, he is supposed to be this side as the front, but whatever. Other than that, I mean, he rolls decently well. It's not a great mode, but we can deal with it. But yeah, he comes with his again, his little individual pistol, which was something that only the Unite Warriors versions did, not the Combiner Wars version. And yeah, you can just store that on top here by just using one of these pegs to peg the gun on there, which, is a little bit more out of the way if you have this as the front, but whatever. I guess, can you do it the other way? Yeah, you can do it the other way so that it's at least pointing forward if you want this to be the front. And then he also comes with the, the set comes, he's designated to have the kind of like middle of the chest shield there, which doesn't really have any place to store, like I've said before, because these bits are really all designed to store on long haul. But yeah, so that's what he looks like in vehicle mode in terms of comparisons. Here he is with Kingdom Sideswipe, so you can see, yeah, that scales relatively well. I think no matter which way you have it, I think if you have it this way, the cab is a little ridiculously small, and it's silly how it like juts out like that, but it still works relatively well. Here he is with Studio Series Scrapper, so you can see what the two of them look like together. And honestly, like him being a bigger vehicle, like that actually kind of scales well too. But yeah, and then here he is with the other three that we have looked at so far from the Unite Warriors set. And, they're a good-looking bunch. I think that they all still look good together, even if his vehicle mode is a little weird. But yeah, to get onto transformation, just like with the other guys, I'm going to be skipping the leg mode and do that in its own separate Devastator video. But first thing you want to do is we want to take the little arm bits down here and just untab them. So you can take this entire back section, just untab that because it tabbed into the hips here, and just fold it down at the knees here and just separate the legs, and that's pretty much it for the legs. They're simple, done. The heels were kind of hidden inside the drum there, which I always think is a little weird, because then he's got this drum on this back, which just has this like huge cutout of it, and it's just like, well, this thing, I know that on the toy it doesn't rotate, but in theory it would rotate in, on the actual guy. So like, where does this chunk come from? I don't know, whatever. But then we want to double hinge out the arms just like that. And we do want to adjust the elbows here, because this is one of the the changes that he's got from the Combiner Wars version is he has separate dedicated elbow joints aside from just those transformation joints. And then you want to take the front / back section here, fold that open, and then flip open the whole head assembly, and then fold that in. And you kind of want to like angle this in so this plate can kind of slide into place, just like that. And pretty simple. There we have Mixmaster in his robot mode. And yeah, I mean, he looks all right, but I would definitely say he's one of the weaker designs from the set overall. He's not too terrible. Really, just the main thing about him is he's got this huge drum kind of hanging out of his back at an angle, which is not great. Which, you know, I know it's part of the Mixmaster design to have the drum on the back, but to have it stick out at that like angle from his butt, kind of looking like a B, is just I don't know. I don't really like the way it looks. And having that trunk missing out of it, you know, it's just not great. And then it also does kind of cause some structural issues because, you know, he really does tend to just like droop back after a while until that's resting on the ground and he's kind of standing up like that. You can kind of adjust it in such a way that it doesn't happen as much, but you have to have him like lean forward ever so slightly to adjust that. But yeah, it's not amazing, but yeah, other than that, he looks okay, like proportionally. He's got a decent head sculpt there, of course, with the kind of like Decepticon head, you know, emblem head sculpt there. In terms of articulation, you can rotate the head, although it is inside this like cavity, so it's kind of annoying to get at, but it is on a ball joint, so it can wiggle around and rotate around. For his shoulder articulation, he's got a swivel there that goes all the way around, and a hinge that only goes about that far to the side before it starts bumping into stuff. He does not have a bicep swivel, unfortunately. He does have a below the elbow swivel, which is, you know, doesn't really work. Now, one of the big changes between this guy and the Combiner Wars version is that the Combiner Wars version just had this as the elbow, which looks really awkward and flimsy, whereas the Unite Warriors version added this whole extra joint in here. So this is supposed to be the elbow joint, and then you can kind of use it as like a double jointed elbow as well. Granted, this joint is much tighter than this joint, so like it's easy to just kind of activate that. So you do have to sort of intentionally decide to move this joint rather than the like more flimsy looking one. But that is definitely a huge improvement in terms of like the look of his arms in general, if you know, actively try to move that joint rather than this one, because it actually looks like he's got a more complete arm. He's got nothing at the waist, obviously, because of how all this stuff sits. Hips can go forward and back and out to the side. Again, I wish the hips were a little bit tighter because they definitely need to be to accommodate this. He's got a thigh swivel here, a degree or two under 90 degrees of bend at the knee, and then his ankles can tilt out to the side, and that's it. So, you know, not the most articulated out of them. I think really the biggest thing is that he's just missing that, you know, bicep swivel. Like he's got this swivel down here, but that doesn't really accomplish a whole lot. But yeah, so, you know, he's definitely one of the weaker ones, but he's not terrible, but he's definitely, I think, one of the ones that's going to be like the biggest improvements for the Studio Series version, even if he is downscaled. But yeah, in terms of his weapons, we can bring those back on. Obviously, he can just hold this like he did before, and, you know, that looks decent. And then if you want, you can just store it on the back here, kind of how it was, just like that. And then he can hold the big shield thing in the middle here, which, you know, looks kind of silly, but and there's really no place to store that either. So yeah, you know, pretty much the same kind of functionality that the rest of the guys have with their weapons. But in terms of comparisons in this mode, trying to just get his elbows working right. Here he is again with Kingdom Sideswipe, so you can see what he looks like with an average size deluxe. So there he goes. Yeah, he really does droop over time. Here he is with Studio Series Scrapper, just so you can see how big of a size difference we're looking there, because, you know, these guys are probably all going to be around the same height, so, you know, he was one of the taller ones too, so he's probably going to get quite a bit of a downgrade when he eventually comes out later in the year. And then here he is with the other Unite Warriors guys that we've looked at so far. And they're a good-looking team, I think. I definitely think out of these four, Mixmaster is by far the weakest one, at least in terms of the Unite Warriors version and not the Combiner Warriors version, because, you know, at least in the Combiner Warriors version, he had any sort of elbows, even if they're kind of like ugly elbows, whereas Scrapper didn't at all. But yeah, you know, he's definitely, I think, one of the weaker ones. But that's what the four of them look like together, and that's pretty much all there is to him. He's not an amazing figure, but he kind of serves his purpose. Again, I think that like a lot of the problems from this guy stem from like not even just like budgetary things, but just the perplexingly like random change that they decided to like make him a different type of cement mixer, because like really like a lot of the things stem from that. Like you could kind of fix a lot of the things if he was just like the more traditional type of cement mixer that he originally turned to in G1, and that's what most people would have preferred, and you probably would have an easier time designing the figure. I don't know how that change got made, but it's just always been kind of like a why would they do that? That just seems like intentionally, making it worse for no good reason kind of thing. But I don't know. Maybe there's some people out there that prefer the kind of more modern, updated cement mixer, but I'm certainly not one of them. But yeah, that's pretty much all there is to them. If you enjoyed my videos, make sure to leave a like and consider subscribing to the channel. I do reviews every Tuesday and Thursday. And without further ado, here we have Transformers Unite Warriors Mixmaster.